So we're going to be discussing kind of the history of the United States and Iran conflict.
First of all, are we calling it Iran or Iran? We need to get this out of the
Iran.
way.
Yeah, it should be Iran. But you know me, I'm an American, so I pronounce everything incorrectly.
Them
and
Iraqis.
I don't even care.
Oh.
Dad, what's Iraq? It's a country.
It's the reason I fell in love with your mother.
Yeah, exactly. My joke was way dumber because it has to be fucking... You have to watch the kid hand to the dad a Playboy saying, Dad, what's Iraq? It's a country. You fucking idiot, Drew. So first of all, Marcus, where is Iran? What is Iran?
What is Iran? I was trying to think of another dumb joke.
Yeah.
It is in the region that people call the Middle East.
The Middle East.
Yes, it borders Iraq, which is why people like to kind of throw them in the same boat.
Mm-hmm,
obviously, they have similar names,
mm-hmm.
too, so that doesn't help.
Yeah, you got Iraq to the west, and then you got Afghanistan to the east.
The east, yes.
So there's two countries that are its neighbors. We've had major engagements over the last couple decades or whatever, being the United States.
Yeah, and obviously it's also in close proximity to, well, it's in missile proximity to Russia and Israel too. So
yes,
and
exactly.
Turkey.
And those
so
are some other good
it
countries there that we should mention. Israel's right next to there, and they're a geopolitical ally of the United States.
Saudi Arabia.
And Saudi Arabia to the south, across the on the what is it? I guess they call it the Arabian Peninsula.
Right.
And then there's some other smaller countries like Oman and Yemen. The countries you don't need to worry about. They're just getting the shit kicked out of them by our weapons by the Saudi Arabians. No big deal. Those are all the relevant countries and all their neighbors and stuff. So now that you guys are kind of relatively aware of where that is, we can begin. We begin our tale all the way back in 1908 with something called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. And that would later become BP. And so basically in May of 08, that's 1908, by the way, not 2008.
President Barack Obama.
Yeah, exactly. Barack Obama. So oil is basically discovered outside of a small town, which is, great because now they're like, oh, sweet, money, right? But basically they want to invest it in education and infrastructure and et cetera, but they can't extract any of it or refine it. They don't have the resources to do that yet. They don't have the technology. They don't have the infrastructure.
Enter the white man.
Yeah, basically, right, dude? So in 1914, they kind of strike a deal with the Brits, right? And they agree to help for 51% of controlling interest of the oil field.
51%.
Which anybody that knows business means
well done,
that
Donald
they
Trump.
own everything, right? It's the best deal. And so because they own 51%, they can make all the rules, right? Like I said, that company later turns into BP. And if that sounds familiar, well, it should.
Sorry.
Because exactly, the Deepwater Horizon fiasco spill in the Gulf there that they tried to cover up by dumping this experimental chemical on it that didn't make the oil dissipate. It just clung to it so it could sink and then sit at the bottom of the ocean so that everyone at the top was like, oh, look, good job. The surface looks great. But then meanwhile, lurking below was the
tons and tons.
Goo. Yeah. And so between the years 1925 and 1941, a dude by the name of Reza Pahlavi takes over as the Shah. And the Shah is basically just like a monarchical ruler, right? And so he rules until 41 when Iran gets invaded by the Brits and the Soviets at the same time. Some super hot three-way invasion going on. England, do you want to get in on this? Oh, yes, oh chap. Hold the head steady. And so the Shah was subsequently forced to abdicate power to his son. And so obviously this was right smack dab in the middle of World War II. And that's why the Brits and the Soviets were invading, because they wanted that sweet, sweet oil that's there, right? Because they needed to fund the war machine.
Yep.
And so in 1941, all the way through 1979, actually, as I said, the Shah's son, Mohammad Reza, takes over. And so now he's the new Shah. And so during the period going all the way into 1951, Mossadegh becomes prime minister.
Mossadegh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and it should. He's the guy who's kind of like the socialist Bernie Sanders type, but Iranian basically. He wasn't a communist, so I guess he's not like Bernie Sanders. But basically, a lot of his political rivals called him one though, mostly just to smear him and to kind of lose face.
That's a dirty word in the politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Even especially back then. This is 51, so this is right when communism's starting to kind of take over. Yeah. So this guy's administration basically primarily focused on policies that were in favor of nationalizing the oil fields.
Let's just to let the government take them over. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Redistribute them to the people because they're getting the short end of the stick, right? Yeah. They're getting 49% or whatever, and they're like, hey, we want a better deal.
49ers with oil. Wait a minute. Okay, sorry.
That's a separate team
Oh,
that's
okay.
coming up this year that's going to get pounded. And so Iran's parliament basically votes to do just that in that same year of 1951. They nationalized the oil
Well,
fields.
we can't be having that.
Yeah, exactly.
cutting into
so
our
that pisses
profits.
off basically Britain. And then they enact an oil embargo, which is just a bunch of sanctions or whatever, saying, using like military and stuff, halting exports by military force.
Right.
Which obviously is not good because now nobody there is making money. And if people aren't making money, the people are getting upset. Their
Quality of life.
quality of life is going down. And so in 1953, the CIA and MI6 orchestrate a coup. And we know this because of declassified documents that are like 60 years old. And they basically show that these intelligence agencies overthrew the democratically elected Mossadegh in favor of Reza.
Wait a minute. You're telling me that the CIA overthrows leaders
I know, right?
in order to change
Shocking.
more Western-friendly agendas?
Shocking, right? This was actually their first one. This was their very first one. Because
Mission
the CIA is
accomplished.
brand new, right? It used to be
True,
the
it's
OSS.
in the- yeah.
Now it's the CIA. And this was called Operation Ajax. As I said, it was the first covert action the United States took to overthrow a foreign government during peacetime. So popping that cherry. Good job, CIA. So but they basically reinstilled Reza, and everything kind of became like business as usual, at least in regards to like the oil situation, and commerce kind of re-began to flow. And so between the years of 63 and 78, the Shah basically enacts a series of reformations. Because of his strong ties to the West, he became sort of like inspired to sort of mirror the U.S. and U.K. system regarding like modernization, education, and capitalism in general, right? Because he's seeing all the awesome shiny stuff, prosperity or whatever, right? And he's like, I want that for my people. These programs, however, were basically really unpopular with a large section of Iranians who were kind of uncomfortable with how chummy he was getting with the West.
Lots of changes.
Yep. And he basically called this movement the White Revolution. And the name is meant to be representative of peace.
Okay.
Like a bloodless revolution.
Okay.
Right? And when I first read that too, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. You're trying to mirror the West and you're calling it a white revolution? Did people just
Eugenics?
say things that are just right on the nose back in the day? Like no euphemisms at all? Like,
Yeah.
But
That's
this
the name
policy,
of my boy band.
the White Revolution. Jesus. Hitler was right. Da 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 da. Hey, hey, hey. So this policy would last for more than 15 years. And in this time, he actually dramatically increased the funding for schools, universities, and dramatically lowering the already like substantially high illiteracy rate that Iran had. In addition, women got the right to vote as well as be eligible to hold public office.
Oh, hell no. We can't have that.
I know, right? Totally. So, I mean, he is doing a lot of like,
Progressive
things, you know what I mean? And people are not exactly ready for that yet, apparently.
Right. He's just, he went too fast, I think.
Too fast, too far,
Too far, too fast.
You know what I mean? Somebody needs to tell this guy about consent, you know what I mean? And foreplay, you know what I mean? You can't just jump right to the fucking whipping out the wiener. In addition, the average citizen's per capita income goes up dramatically. So cost of living goes down, but, quality of life goes up. What the Shah did not expect was that the White Revolution would lead to like a new social tensions that would basically help create many problems that the Shah had been trying to avoid, namely the growing divide between the social classes. So like between like the upper and middle classes and like the peasants.
Right.
Who increasingly viewed the Shah as like opulent, rich, elitist puppet douchebag of the West, basically. And juxtaposed to Mossadegh, right? Who was like the humble socialist man of the people, right?
Right.
So this unpopularity led to the rise of like a sect of religious like fundamentalists on the right. And specifically this guy named Ayatollah Khomeini.
The Ayatollah.
The Ayatollah. Sock it to him. He's basically like a politician and religious cleric kind of wrapped up into one kind of weird like position. This guy was in exile for like the last 14 years living in Paris. So like the year after they started the White Revolution, he's like, screw this, I'm out of here, and goes over to Paris, right, and lives there for some reason.
He also had a fascination with rock and roll, right?
I did not know that.
Well, he was the Ayatollah of rock and roll.
You're retarded. That's so funny because you almost had me because I'm like, that's weird because he was like hardcore religious fundamentalist. I would figured he wouldn't like rock and roll. So in 1979, President Jimmy Carter, he basically visits Iran and praises the Shah for all of his country's accomplishments. And they have like a big dinner.
And builds homes for all their poor people.
Oh, that was way later. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Habitat for Iranian humanity. So they have a big dinner, nice big old banquet. He does like a nice toast, says some kind words about the Shah, and then leaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like immediately after, audio tapes of the Ayatollah's sermons began to be distributed amongst the Iranian underground, encouraging people to like copy and distribute, more of these video or audio tapes and keep passing them out. It was like the first example of like viral video. You know what I mean? He's like, listen to this and then, pass it to your friends.
And they're selling hot mixtapes out of their trunk.
Yeah, exactly, right? 1 for 5, 4 for 15. So these tapes are basically disparaging the Shah's government that, he makes too much money and he wants to be like the West. He's lost his identity, yada, yada. And so with all this set up, an event takes place in a theater called the Cinema Rex and in a town called Abadin. The event starts when 4 men douse the building with like airplane fuel before setting it alight and kill all 420 people that are inside. Men, women, children, everybody. It was actually the largest terror attack in history in the world until September 11th.
Damn.
Which is kind of...
Were you going to speak on their motivation and who the people were? Okay.
So the ruling Shah's regime of Iran initially blamed the Islamic Marxists for the fire and later reported that Islamic militants started it. While, anti-Shah protesters blamed the Savak. And the Savak is basically Iran's like secret police. It's like a police and intelligence force, internal security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They blamed them for setting the fire. And now today it's not 100% known with certainty, but the Ayatollahs were the ones who were able to leverage this tragedy to the most of their advantage, which says a lot to me,
Huh. Okay.
It's kind of similar to the false flag that happened at with the Reichstag fire in Germany.
Right.
Where freaking presumably elements of like Hitler's crew freaking set it on fire and blamed some like Russian Bolshevik dude named van der Lubbe, I think, who also was like mentally retarded and stuff. And they just like found him out back rolling around in like the dirt, basically like, like, oh, it must have been this guy who can't tie his own shoes or any of these other things, but was able to freaking craftily put the fire in like this strategic enough place that it would like, spread quickly and kill everybody inside. So this basically creates an atmosphere of distrust and contempt for the Shah. He's killing his own people and, he's worth all this money and, quote, nobody should be worth $1 billion. And, he's out of touch with the people. And there's all these demonstrations and stuff happening all over the country, right? He's starting to lose control of the situation.
Yeah.
So on January 16th, 1979, the Shah and his family leave Iran at the behest of President Jimmy Carter just 2 weeks after his little dinner toast thing where he visited and came by and said all those pleasant things. Man. Super quick. So things are unfolding super fast. Yeah. And again, this is like in the 70s, right? So, as fast as we were like, as the news cycle or whatever moves here as far as events and stuff like that, think about it back then where things were slower. And now 2 weeks later, the ruler of a country is like, well, I guess I better go.
The Iranian Spring. Yeah,
no kidding, right? And so because the Ayatollahs were able to leverage this tragedy, they were able to kind of gain a footing, an upper hand rather in the, in the minds of the supporters of the people, you know what I mean? And it kind of reminds me of that Rahm Emanuel quote, who I think, I don't know if he went back to being the mayor of Chicago, which is pretty horrible because, Chicago's like the most like corrupt city in America or whatever, but he was also President Obama's Secretary of State, I want to say, or maybe Chief of Staff.
He was in his cabinet. I just couldn't remember which one.
Yeah. But this piece of shit said basically, never let a good crisis go to waste, which could be interpreted in a lot of ways, which is just like, oh, be ready for some terrible thing happen that you can now push your agenda through because people are more, softened up emotionally because of how horrible this tragedy is.
Right.
Or it could be interpreted as like, the Hungarian dialect of problem, reaction, solution. You present to them with the problem, they react in the way they're going to react, and then you present them with the solution that they ask for.
Right.
Assuming that it's all like, oh, it's all organic. You're like, in reality, you've been planning this out the whole time. Yeah.
So they try to make it look like a terrorist act. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this.
I don't know exactly how, like the logistics of it, but basically there was only two possible groups that wanted power, so that there was only two groups that had motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was the people that are in charge already, the Shah, and his Savak group of spies and shit.
So
were
they
the fundamentalist religious?
Were they trying to say that like
people.
he can't keep us safe and like look what happens under his government, or like
some people? I'm sure that was going around too, but some people were saying that the Shah committed this horrible murders in order to frame the Ayatollah. Because they knew that they were feuding. And so I guess in these people's minds, whoever hold that opinion would say like, well, he would have done that in order to gain favor with us, but we're smart enough and we're seeing through it. And he was the one who like set the fire, and he's just trying to blame the Ayatollah, who's actually just this good religious dude who wants what's best for the country or whatever. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Things can get kind of like in the mud and in the weeds, as it were, and get kind of complicated as far as like logistics.
Especially when you're in the midst of a revolution.
Yeah, exactly. But the basic like black and white of it is like there's two groups that are vying for
power. One
power.
Wants power, yeah.
One of them did it, and they're both blaming each other.
Crazy.
So another 2 weeks after that, Soleimani returns from his 14 years of exile to like huge crowds. There's a bunch of video of him like getting off the plane in Tehran, the capital, and it's just like the Beatles just got to America kind of
right.
thing, where people are like screaming, "Oh my God, you're so awesome!"
Passing out.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, fainting. So after he gets there, this motherfucker cleans house. He starts disappearing people all over the place. Lots of people get killed, mostly in like the military brass and internal security. You know, people who know things, or maybe who aren't sympathetic to his cause, right?
And he's sniping them out. Yeah.
Yep. They got to solidify power, so you got to make sure that the people that are underneath you are loyal. And so later that year in November, Islamic militants take 52 American hostages at an embassy, and they're held for over a year.
Right.
So this is the big. This is usually when most Americans
pick up the history
tune in to Iran of like, hey, what's that going on over there? Oh my God, these crazy
bunch of our
had
people.
A religion and now, had a revolution and now they're holding a bunch of our people there. That's not cool. Yeah, a lot of people basically know this instance, in history, basically from that documentary that they made with Ben Affleck.
Oh yeah,
Daredevil. Exactly. And Argo. Sorry. And which is actually not half bad movie. I liked it actually. So the Shah ends up dying of cancer while he was living in Egypt, summer of that year. So basically like a year after he gets exiled, he just croaks. Yeah. So now the Ayatollah doesn't have to worry about him or any of his supporters. So on January the 20th, 1980, the hostages are released 20 minutes after an inaugural address. Whose inaugural address was that, Marcus? This gives rise to something called the October Surprise conspiracy theory. The timing was so strange that it gave rise to the allegations that like representatives of Reagan's presidential campaign, because Reagan and Carter were in the midst of like a super close election, right?
Right.
And this kind of overlooming issue of the hostages in Iran was a big political hot button point.
Yeah. It's just one of those conveniently timed events that are going on in an election year.
Yeah, it happens to have some sort of massive strategic significance for, let's say, only one
party.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So basically the allegations are that President Reagan's campaign had like conspired with part of Iran's leadership in order to delay the release of the hostages until the election in order to thwart President Carter and that's what's called the October Surprise, and is now known forever as it's like a term that means bringing out some sort of scandalous information that could hurt your opponent just weeks before an election. So a lot of people will like hold on to certain bits of information as like ammo that they can unload on their political candidate very soon, from an election or whatever. Like what's happening with this Iowa caucus thing. I don't know if you watched the last fucking presidential debates, bro. Right. But Elizabeth Warren came over and tried to pull some like nonsense
stuff on Bernie. Yeah.
Yep, and it backfired hard. But like everybody was asking like, well, why didn't you bring this up like months ago? You said you guys had this meeting over a year and a half ago.
Right.
And this just kind of leans suspicion to be like, well, I definitely wasn't holding on to it, to release it when it would have its maximum effective, damage.
Never.
And so basically the point of it was to make Carter look like even weaker, and that Iran like maybe was more afraid of Reagan, because Reagan was more of what you'd call a hardliner. Yeah. Where,
where Carter wanted to be the friends.
Like a peacenik.
Diplomat.
Yeah, exactly. So according to the allegations, the Reagan administration subsequently rewarded Iran for its participation in a plot by supplying Iran with weapons via like Israel and unblocking Iranian government monetary assets in the United States Bank, which is weird because what does that remind you of, Marcus? Does that remind you of a certain military scandal, like intelligence Operation
There was this
Scandal
really
that
cool.
happened.
There was this really cool video game made by Konami.
Contra.
Contra.
That was a good game.
I love that game.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with that.
Oh,
Yeah, the IranContra, exactly. Call back from episode 2, I believe. Where basically the plan was like later complicated in late 85 with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North of the National Security Council diverted a portion of the proceeds from Iran's weapon sales to fund the Contras, which is like a group of like anti-Sandinista rebels in their insurgency against the socialist government of Nicaragua. So that's where the problem happened. is they were trading hostages for weapons and money, and also like sending happened to also just taking off like a slice of that and just kind of funneling a little bit of that, taking it right off the top,
skimming it off the top,
skimmed it off there off the cream, and funneling it down to South America to fund like black CIA operations and insurgencies and stuff in
well, it worked
South
really well in
America.
Iran. Let's do it
Keep
down
this
there.
party going,
Yeah.
dude, right? And it's funny because when I was researching this, it just says a portion of the proceeds. We have no idea how much money Oliver North was just like, all right, just pack up like that little group of money
Black
into a
budgets,
bag
yeah.
and just fucking pack it on a plane and send it where you need to go.
Yeah.
So between 1980 and 1988, Iran and Iraq start fighting. And the U.S., of course, supported Saddam Hussein, which is kind of bizarre.
Wait a minute, we supported Saddam Hussein?
Yeah, there's a great picture of, I can't remember who it was. I think it was, that's right, old Rummy. I'm trying to remember whose cabinet he was on, but basically it's a picture of him shaking hands with Saddam Hussein, basically like going like, all right, we're going to give you guys all these weapons to fight Iran, and here's the chemical weapons that we're going to give you, and don't use these on the Kurds now.
Don't you do that, silly Hussein.
And over 1.5 million dead Iranians are the result of this conflict. And who was the president at this time, Marcus?
You said it was 1980?
1980 to 1988.
Oh, jeez. Who else could it
Famous movie
be?
star, popular California governor.
Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Exactly. Exactly. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Do it. Do it now.
Do it now. Tear down. Yeah. So yeah, Reagan is rocking it. So in 1988, Iranian Air Flight 655 is shot down by the United States, killing all 290 people aboard. 66 of them were kids, by the way.
So let's stop there for a second.
That's a good place to stop.
Because so far, look at all the things that we've done to this country.
Yeah, that's kind of what gets my goat, dude. And that's kind of part of why I wanted to do this, is because a lot of people, especially
They hate
with
us
the
for our
recent
freedoms.
Exactly, dude. Exactly.
They hate our
Thank
freedom.
you. Thank you. A lot of this stuff with like Soleimani, which we're going to get to here in a minute, because it's obviously more recent, had me kind of really like just some of the comments that I'd be reading from people on like
So
Twitter or whatever.
short-sighted. And,
Yes. It's like, dude, you guys have no idea about history. Like, don't get me wrong. That has no bearing necessarily on whether the guy deserved to die or not. All I'm saying is that like you can't look at it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the Navy cruiser USS Vincennes, must be Italian or some kind of Spanish, has been disputed between the governments of the two countries. So basically So according to the United States, the ship's crew had like incorrectly identified the civilian Airbus as an attacking F14 Tomcat, which is the same plane from Top Gun, which was that Tom Cruise documentary.
Yeah.
about naval recruitment. It's a United States-made jet fighter, and it's not even close to the same size as the jet, which matters because radar signatures have to do with like the size of aircraft
absolutely.
and the angle at which the radar hits it and yada yada.
Man, radar signatures, we just can't get those right.
I know, right? Totally. The F-14 Tomcat had been part of the Iranian Air Force's inventory, since like the 1970s. Because, we love selling weapons to other countries.
Of course. Let them fight.
Right. It's kind of like taking all of our like secondhand weapons down to like a giant like international goodwill or Salvation Army.
Yeah, watching your younger siblings fight over your old toys.
Yeah, exactly. And all the poorer countries get to have access to like the lightly used, shall we say, secondhand high-tech weaponry.
Right, or throwing the bones to the wolves after you had your gourmet meal.
Yes, after you've gorged yourself on it. Mm-hmm. I don't even want this anymore. So the Vincennes had apparently made like 10 attempts to contact the aircraft, both on military and civilian frequencies, but apparently it didn't respond. So according to Iran, the cruiser neglectedly shot down the aircraft, which was transferring something called an IFF, which is a identification friend or foe.
Right.
And
a little
it's
ping.
the squawk. Yeah, exactly. Apparently it was in mode 3, which is like a signal that identifies it as a civilian aircraft, and not mode 2, which is supposedly used by the Iranian military aircraft, which I don't know how one would like change that. Like, I don't know if there's like a little switch on the cockpit or whatever.
Just
that, like,
change
the
it whenever
pilot
you're
bumped his
flying
knee.
over a hostile
like,
area.
Damn it, it was in section 3. Damn it, no wonder we got shot down.
Wouldn't that be convenient?
So it's kind of up in the air. Nobody really knows exactly what happened. But we're gonna relive this whole whoops, I did it again.
Strange
shot
things,
down stuff.
Strange things happen over Middle Eastern airspaces,
all the time. And so later in 1955, Clinton puts out like an oil embargo and trade sanctions on Iran.
An oral embargo?
Sorry, an oil.
President Clinton?
Yeah, oil
back
embargo.
Up here. Back up here.
I don't know why he ended up putting sanctions on them, but I think it was just from like the last couple of decades of Iran kind of piping up. And so he wanted to probably look
down over there.
Yeah, exactly. He wanted to look like he was in control. And so later in 2003, Iran suspends its uranium enrichment program. It allows tougher UN inspections of nuclear facilities and the needed sanctions lifted because it has no money.
Yeah.
And so that was under Bush II's, President Bush II. Boy, I'd like to tell you, now that I'm sure I do appreciate this cooperation we've been getting with all them nuclear looky-loos coming around your facilities. Can I get a couple of barrels of oil? I'm fucking jonesing over here. And so in 2006 to 2010, the U.S. implements new sanctions with a bunch of goals. They have like 4 goals that they want to try to undo here. Now, this is under 2006, 2008.
That was Bush going into Obama.
Obama's, yeah, exactly. Yeah. After that, President Obama. So they the 4 goals that they wanted to do here was number 1, stop enrichment of uranium. Number 2, stop the exporting of weapons. Only the United States can do that. Number 3, banking restrictions. And of course 4, trade and travel restrictions. Sorry, it wasn't very good. My Obama was the worst one. It's hard to do. It's a very articulate guy. Did a little blow. So in 2012, the economy of Iran just takes a big shit. And the currency loses 80% of its value almost like in like a week because of the U.S. sanctions, right? So it just cripples the average like citizen over there. Later in 2015, the Obama nuclear deal, or what's later called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, it was an agreement of the Iranian nuclear program that was reached in Vienna of July 14 of 2015. It was basically between Iran and the P5+1, which was like the 5 permanent members of the the United Nations Security Council, which is China, Russia, France, United Kingdom, and United States.
There you go.
And plus Germany. That's the +1. It's like a nightclub.
Like a thumb.
Germany was like France. Germany was like hitting up France and UK as their +1. Like, hello, yeah, this is Deutschland, yeah. Oh, hi guys, yeah, I want to come into the Vienna party, big party with Saran.
He snuck in there with a big jacket. France had an overcoat. And just like,
all right, come on, hurry up, go. Yeah, I'm glad we are friends again. And so this is also where we hear about the $150 billion that was given back to Iran, or the $1.5 billion in cash on a pallet.
On a pallet.
Yeah, you ever heard like pallets of cash? Like Obama gave pallets of cash to Iran.
Oh,
as like a sweetener for fucking,
right.
Well, that's true, but that was also like unfrozen assets that was theirs technically, I guess.
Okay.
But that was like wrapped up in our, system, yeah?
Yeah.
And he did that as like a sweetener, hoping that they would.
So the Iranians use the American banks like the Americans use the Swiss banks.
Yeah, basically.
It's a tax haven in the West.
For real. So finally in 2018, like, all right, getting closer to modern time here now, Trump basically withdraws completely from Obama's deal.
Yeah.
And this is in May of 2018. And so
the art of backing out of the deal.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. The art of crushing the deal. And so later in August in 2018, Trump enforces like a new round of sanctions. And then in 2019, we had the Strait of Hormuz incident, which was, so the Strait of Hormuz is the strait of water that's in between the Persian Gulf that we talked about earlier and the Gulf of Oman, which is, again, one of those tiny little countries that's perched off the east side of the Arabian Peninsula. Basically, it provides the only sea passage for the Persian Gulf to the open sea and is one of the world's like most strategic, most important choke points.
You want to control that.
Absolutely, dude. It's a big region like...
the hot gates.
Exactly, dude, for real. Big countries like China, Japan, India, South Korea, the United States, everybody ships stuff in and out of there. Mostly energy-related oil.
Oil.
So the strait is about 90 nautical miles long. with a width that varies from like 52 miles all the way down to 21 miles, which on a map is like a sliver. It's a third of the world's liquefied natural gas, and almost 25% of the total global oil consumption passes through that strait.
Yikes.
Making it like an insanely important strategic location for all international trade.
It's the girl all the bad guys want.
Yeah. That was perfectly said, sir. I know exactly what you meant. So basically what happened is a couple of key points. So Iran diverted a British flagged oil tanker to one of its ports, which the UK said was illegal. Another thing was said that the U.S. forces destroyed an Iranian drone that came close to the USS Boxer. In addition, the U.S. said that it was ready to carry out airstrikes after Iran shot down that drone. And 2 tankers were also damaged by explosions after leaving the Strait of Hormuz. And there's even like photos that are kind of contested because anybody can do anything with photos now, but of presumably members of the Iranian military either taking off or putting on what looks like some sort of demolition, like some explosive, perhaps like a mine, perhaps, which is weird because if they're saying that they're taking it off, why would they be taking it off? And I guess the narrative of that was that the mine didn't explode, and so they went to take it off in order to get rid of the evidence. But it's like, well, everyone's watching you take this thing off. Which brings us to the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. This occurred in Iraq on December 31st, 2019, so just a day before 2020. The Hezbollah militiamen and their supporters and sympathizers attacked the U.S. Embassy, destroying and setting fire to part of the building. Thankfully, no deaths or serious injuries occurred during the time of the attack, which brings us all the way up to the 2020 Soleimani attack. So Soleimani was assassinated in a targeted U.S. drone strike on January the 3rd in Baghdad, which was approved by President Trump. And so in the early morning hours, the commander of Iran's Quds force, which again is like their special forces, like the Green Berets of Iran, the General Qassem Soleimani and another gentleman named Abu Mahdi al-Mondis, don't quote me on how to pronounce all those, were assassinated in a U.S. drone strike while traveling in a convoy near Baghdad International Airport. I'm not gonna lie, dude, it was amazingly accurate. So
well, drone strikes. Drone strikes can be if we want them to be.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Because I was going to say, remember Obama's like non-congressional drone strikes all the time? Is
collateral damage. What the hell is that?
Sometimes droning American citizens.
Yeah.
No big deal. Yeah, they had horrible accuracy. I'm trying to remember the statistics of it or whatever, but it was like an under a 10% accuracy rate with like a 90% casualty or collateral damage rate, which is just insanely high. Like, you want to talk about pissing other people off who had nothing to do with this conflict. You know what I mean? Now suddenly becoming an enemy to the United States.
Just creating more radicals.
Dude, no kidding. That definitely happens. So the strike was strongly condemned by the Iranian government, obviously, hours after Soleimani's burial on January the 7th, 2020.
So there's lots of chest shoving going on at this point.
Yeah, chest bumping and, well, not chest bumping, chest beating and saber rattling and whatever the term is for like trying to puff out your chest and act tough as a country.
Little shoves like, oh yeah, what are you gonna do?
Yeah?
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
Punk? Yeah. Meet you up by the bike racks, bro, after school. So basically, hours after Soleimani's burial, Iran launches military missiles against the United States bases in Iraq, and no lives were lost in that attack as well. There's actually a lot of rumors that Iranian officials called up the bases
and told them to evacuate.
And told the Iraqis to evacuate, knowing that once the Iraqis start piling out because they got a phone call, that the Americans would do the same thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, like, well, why the hell would they do that? Isn't that strategically what you don't want to do? And it's like, well, yes and no. If your goal is to, like you said, saber rattle, bump your chest, and be like, hey, look, we got them back. We launched,
it's a show of force.
We punched back. Exactly. Yeah. But also you don't want to call down the mightiest murderous thunder of freaking the United States.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. So the missile retaliation.
Especially with I don't know if it's worth mentioning, but especially with a trigger happy person on the trigger.
Absolutely. Yeah, no kidding.
And maybe it's also worth mentioning too that, the other thing about this issue with attacks going on in Iraq is that we've been trying to sort of withdraw, and at the same time, even the Iraqis aren't very happy with us currently. So
that's funny because that's actually a similar thing that that Jimmy Dore dude was talking about, how the only issue that the left and right are united on, which is hilarious talking about what's going on right now as far as how deep partisanship fucking is right now in the United States. The only two things that both the left and right agree on is the maintaining of these fucking preemptive regime change wars in the Middle East for all the faults of all the different like leaders and stuff. When Trump tried to pull out of Afghanistan or Syria, I think it was Afghanistan, he got the fucking caning from his own constituents or whatever, and then he ended up putting them back in. And it's just lame, dude. It's one of those things of like, well, dude, what do you want? You know what I mean? Like you're gonna guy ran on a campaign of getting our troops out of there, like Tulsi Gabbard style, and then when he actually tries to do that, you're like, wait a minute, we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet to take other people out.
Well, I think the problem with that was that there was no real warning to
these allies or whatever.
Yeah,
to coalition forces.
Yeah, I was trying to remember their name because they were helping us keep ISIS at bay around this like one particular camp that they've kind of rounded up.
We're doing ISIS that with Syria too, and then all of a sudden we like stopped, and then now Syria's our enemy, and I don't know.
It's complicated, man.
I guess, yeah. It's I don't know what the fuck we're doing over there, dude. Like, I mean, I'm sure if somebody told me, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But at the same time, like, I'm with Tulsi. I don't even care. Like, we need to get the fuck out of there, dude. This is ridiculous. We've been going on for 19 years.
Yeah,
it's never gonna stop.
It's not exactly a land war in Asia, but we're pretty much
it's the same thing.
Land war.
You know what it's more like? It's like that Tom Hanks movie, The Money Pit. And the money pit is the Middle East. And we're just trying to like throw money at it with a dumb fucking plan without getting people on the ground to be understanding cultural differences to bring people together.
Yeah, well, it would be amazing because if we could get off of oil, then we would have no reason to be fucking over there in the first place.
Brings it up all the time, which is like, dude, if we could just become energy independent, which actually surprisingly we're doing that right now, but we have to tap into fucking the Alaskan like wilderness in order to do it, which I'm not exactly super fucking fond of, or that pipeline that they're talking about. I'm not fond of that either. Again, it's one of those things like, bro, what do we do? Like, on one hand, we start like drilling in the Alaskan tundra and building that fucking fucked up Dakota pipeline through everybody's like backyard, basically, or do we keep sucking the Middle Eastern dick of like of oil and just like, yes sir, whatever you want?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, and while in the meantime, fucking all of our troops are dying for what, dude? Like, so this is actually the last part that we're gonna bring up here.
Okay.
This is the Ukraine International Airlines flight 752.
Oh boy,
yeah. So that gets shot down by Iran. So the international passenger flight from Tehran to Kiev was shot down shortly after takeoff from the Tehran International Airport. All 176 people and crew are fucking killed. And it was shot down by an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran, which attributed the incident to human error. What they say basically is that
radar signatures.
Hassan Rouhani basically described, that the incident was an unforgivable mistake. Apparently, it was like a SAM site, surface-to-air missile site that was on like some sort of automated sweep of the sky, of the radar area or whatever, and picked up this plane like 2 minutes after it fucking took off, dude, and shot it down. If the video is to be believed, there's like a cell phone video of it. It's not like highly detailed, but you see like the plane, you see it struck once, struck again, and then just it goes out of frame, but you're just like, holy F. Like,
and the thing about this is it wasn't flying over restricted airspace, right?
So, well, see, that's the thing. Like you were saying earlier or whatever, like, don't trust the airspace in the Middle East, right? Like, because there's always little conflicts going on over there. And that's always like a big political hot button issue. Like when the Arab Spring was happening, there was a lot of like injunctions for the Senate or whoever to announce a no-fly zone in certain areas. I think Syria, the no-fly zone in Syria was like a big like political hot button topic or whatever, because it means, and a no-fly zone just basically means like nobody can fly over it. That means that, you can't take any surveillance pictures, no like bombings, any of that stuff. It's basically quiet everything down for a minute while like the peace talkers like talk it out or whatever. The only problem with that is you have to enforce that. And so that means it's dragging you into it. So if you're going to enforce a no-fly zone and then somebody flies up their planes, that means you have to shoot it down. Now you're involved because you just killed whatever, you know what I mean? And so it's this big political quagmire that nobody wanted to get into.
It's like you're trying to be the mediator in between two people and then you get punched.
Yes, literally. Hey guys, just calm down. Like, oh, now I'm getting in this fight. I asked myself that question too, bro, because what the fuck were those people doing flying out of
Tehran?
Out of Tehran, dude. Like, I mean, and a lot of them there were like Canadian and Australian, I guess. Canada has a large population of people in Ukraine, I guess, for like work or whatever. I don't know, it's bizarre, dude. I don't know why they were allowing civilian aircraft to fly in there when they're in the middle of a conflict zone. I don't know like the rules or whatever. So I mean, it's easy for me to Captain Hindsight it and be like, hey, they should have done this or that.
Right.
my general consensus would be like, dude, if you're in any conflict zone, dude, stay the fuck out of the air. But so that's basically it. And now that we're all caught up, hopefully that kind of brings some of this information that we've been hearing recently, kind of put it into a better perspective. You know what I mean? It doesn't necessarily black and white, you know, cut it into two categories of, you know, this is right, this is wrong.
And there's a
this
lot more.
position's
There's a
better
lot
than
more.
that position,
You know,
but
there's a lot more smaller news stories that are involved in everything.
absolutely. But
it's a good overview.
yeah, and that way you can kind of make a better decision on, you know, if it comes down to Iran in the future. Well, hey man, chicks fucking love Hummers, bro.
Do you see they're bringing back the H1 and they're making an EV?
Oh, wait a minute, what?
Yes.
Hold on. So you had me on, hey, they're bringing back the H1. I'm like, yeah, the only good Hummer. And then you're like, they're making it an
electrical vehicle. And they're touting,
so they're
trying to
just right off of the fucking animal.
They're trying to go after the Cybertruck market. Like they're trying to compete against the Cybertruck and be like, you know, hey, ours is actually a truck. It's got all this torque and it goes 0 to 60.
Totally.
Yeah.
Comes with a gun rack.
Right. This is a man's electric vehicle.
Fucking man's electrical vehicle, son of a bitch. Not this pussy little Elon Musk backing into fucking fire hydrants and fucking up the whole goddamn presentation.
Shattering windows and shit.
Idiot. I actually love that, man. You can get rid of any of that if you want to say that. I don't even know about it.
Yeah, I just want to let you know.
Or I could be just a hilarious little thing at the end. Fucking, I don't know.
Where the hell were we?
Right here.